Why do some people perceive autistic behavior as rude? This is a question that few dare to explore deeply. In a world where everyone is expected to follow the same social rules and communication patterns, autistic individuals, with their unique nuances and ways of interacting, are often misunderstood. What many see as a lack of manners or interest actually hides layers of experiences, sensory challenges, and an unrelenting search for authenticity. Here's something few people know. What may seem like rudeness is largely a matter of perspective. This video goes beyond superficial labels to explore how autism truly affects social interactions. Have you ever considered that by understanding these differences, you could completely transform how you see and relate to others? The answer to so many misunderstandings is right here, waiting to be uncovered. Ready to unveil this truth and broaden your perspective on what it truly means to be rude or disconnected? After all, understanding is the first step toward creating a more welcoming world. Understanding autism and social interaction. Social interaction is, for many, familiar ground. However, for autistic people, the scene can feel like a foreign language. Imagine someone feeling somewhat out of place in casual conversations, whether it's difficulty interpreting others or confusion about expressions that seem to stray from reality. Autistic people often face judgments from others, being seen as rude or indifferent when, in reality, each gesture is an effort to communicate. Rather than disinterest, it reveals an attempt to grasp nuances that come naturally to others. Neurotypical people are often surprised to see that an autistic person's behavior defies what they consider normal. Here, being direct or choosing specific words may come across as blunt, but it's simply an authentic way to express themselves. Imagine an autistic individual being perceived as rude just for saying what they think plainly, a detail many overlook. This cultural clash is what turns a simple "I don't want to" into apparent coldness, when, in fact, it's just a clear boundary, without any intention to offend or provoke. There's a certain irony when society, which so values honesty, judges autistic people as rude for their straightforwardness. In everyday relationships, misinterpretation of an autistic person's intentions is common. This judgment can be disheartening and, at times, hurtful. But the reality is that autistic people seek sincere interaction, without the typical social embellishments. And here lies an intriguing reflection on human interactions. Can we find new ways to understand one another? Eye contact challenges. Eye contact is one of the most ingrained gestures in human communication, but for many autistic people, it's uncomfortable and even exhausting. In some cultures, especially in the West, looking into someone's eyes signifies respect and attention. When an autistic person avoids eye contact, it's as if they're immediately labeled as rude or evasive. However, what's at play here is sensory overload, making a simple gaze feel almost invasive. Imagine being in a conversation where each look feels like a spotlight directly on your eyes, bringing a fatigue that most people can't imagine. What's natural for some is a true effort for others. Many even develop techniques to navigate this discomfort, like looking at the space between the eyes or focusing on a neutral point. These little tricks are ways to show respect without subjecting themselves to an uncomfortable sensation. Sadly, the lack of understanding around this particular trait leads to judgment. The autistic person, already facing communication challenges, must also deal with the stigma of appearing distant or uninterested. This issue highlights an urgent need, learning to recognize that communication styles can vary widely among individuals. After all, not everyone finds expression through eye contact, and that's perfectly fine as long as respect is the foundation of interaction. Literal understanding of humor and sarcasm. Humor and sarcasm add richness to conversations, but for many autistic individuals, these aspects of language can be like a maze. Imagine a situation where someone makes a subtle joke or a casual irony, and the autistic person interprets it literally. The result is often a confused expression or a response that seems out of context, leading others to see this reaction as rude or lacking empathy. In truth, it's simply a different way of decoding messages. This literal interpretation can be especially challenging in environments where humor is common, like among friends or coworkers. A simple "I'm starving" might be met with genuine concern by someone who understands words at face value. Situations like these reveal how complex communication really is and how these misunderstandings can affect relationships between neurotypical and autistic individuals. But not all hope is lost. Many autistic people, over time, learn to identify patterns in speech that indicate irony or humor. Some even build an internal library of expressions and phrases to help them recognize when a joke is at play. This skill is developed to fit into social environments, though it requires constant effort and practice. This strategy brings up an important question: are there simpler ways to interact without requiring this internal translation? Small talk and social norms. For many autistic people, small talk, those casual, brief exchanges that seem to arise out of nowhere, is a true mystery. While most see these dialogues as icebreakers, autistic individuals may find such exchanges empty, almost mechanical. Imagine someone who, when asked about the weather, responds with the exact forecast, while the other person expected a light comment. This type of interaction often leads others to see the person as rude or distant simply for not following these social patterns. These social conventions, seen as so natural, may feel pointless for someone on the spectrum. Instead of engaging in superficial dialogues, many autistic people prefer deep, direct conversations where they can share genuine ideas. At a party, for instance, they might ignore comments about the music to discuss something they're truly interested in, like a book topic or scientific discovery. This desire for more authentic conversation is what's often misunderstood by those who follow traditional social norms. Nonetheless, some autistic people use strategies to navigate small talk and avoid seeming impolite. One technique is to mentally prepare standard responses to common questions, like, "How are you?" These tricks are a form of adaptation, but they also bring up a question: why do we value conventions so much and underestimate the richness that authentic conversation could bring? Sensitivity to nonverbal cues. Reading between the lines, that subtle understanding of facial expressions, gestures, or tone of voice, is a language filled with mysteries for many autistic individuals. While these nonverbal signals come naturally to most people, for autistic individuals, deciphering them can be a challenging task. Imagine being in a situation where, without a single word, the other person expects you to understand their displeasure or excitement. When this interpretation doesn't happen, autistic people are often seen as rude or indifferent, when, in reality, they simply miss the nonverbal message. Visual communication, like a smile or a raised eyebrow, has its nuances, and it's not uncommon for those on the spectrum to miss these cues. In a group conversation, for instance, someone might expect the autistic person to pick up on a gesture indicating it's their turn to speak, but this visual prompt may easily go unnoticed. In this dynamic, neurotypical people interpret silence as disinterest or even disdain when, in fact, it's simply a lack of natural understanding of these signals. The truth is that many autistic people strive to compensate for this difficulty by consciously learning to recognize specific gestures and expressions. Some even study body language or use internal reminders to capture what others hope to convey without words. It's an admirable adaptation, but it raises a question: what if we all put a little more effort into expressing our intentions clearly instead of relying solely on what goes unspoken? Sensory sensitivity and overload. Imagine being in an environment where every sound, every light, and every smell is felt with an intensity that's hard to bear. For many autistic individuals, the world is like this, a place full of stimuli that can quickly lead to sensory overload. In such a situation, an autistic person may react in a way that seems abrupt or rude, as if they're irritated for no reason. However, what's actually happening is an attempt at self-preservation, an effort to cope with an overwhelming scenario. Busy places, like a supermarket at peak time or a crowded train station, are real challenges. In the face of excess noise and people, an autistic person might react abruptly when needing space or trying to exit a stressful situation. This reaction, which at first glance seems out of proportion or impolite, is actually a response to an exhausting sensory experience. For those who don't live this reality, it can be hard to imagine, but a little understanding goes a long way. Many autistic people develop strategies to handle sensory overload, like carrying headphones to block out noise or choosing clothing made of specific fabrics that don't irritate the skin. These solutions are attempts to make the world a bit more livable. Observing these adaptations, an interesting question arises: could our surroundings be more inclusive and prepared to accommodate different sensitivities? After all, small adjustments can greatly improve many people's experiences. Rigid thinking and routine dependence. For many autistic people, routine is more than a daily schedule. It's an anchor, a way to find stability in a world filled with uncertainties. Sudden changes, like a rescheduled appointment or a canceled plan, can provoke a reaction that seems extreme to those who don't understand this need for predictability. What might look like resistance or even inflexible rudeness is actually how an autistic person maintains mental and emotional balance. This dependence on routine is a way to build a sense of control over the environment. Imagine someone who, every day, follows the same steps to start their morning, waking up at the same time, making coffee in a specific way, and completing a precise order of tasks. When something disrupts this rhythm, it's as if a gear is knocked out of place, causing discomfort and disorientation. This reaction is often seen as stubbornness or rigidity, but it's actually a need for order to cope with a world that's already complex by nature. Some autistic people use methods to ease the impact of change, like anticipating possible adjustments in their plans or relying on visual reminders. These strategies help maintain mental organization and face unexpected situations with less stress. But it raises an important question: how far can we go to respect this need for routine while also creating more flexible and understanding environments? After all, harmony is built through effort and consideration on both sides. Strategies for better social interactions. For many autistic people, social interactions can become less challenging with some practical strategies that enable clearer communication and reduce misunderstandings. One common technique is using social scripts, prepared phrases or responses that help structure the conversation in familiar situations, like a greeting or farewell. These scripts don't take away authenticity but serve as a guide that makes it easier to adapt to social norms, promoting smoother, more natural interactions without having to guess how to respond. Another effective strategy is developing active listening, a skill that many autistic people find difficult to master, especially in settings with a lot of stimuli. Practicing active listening can involve, for example, focusing on a keyword from the other person's speech or mentally noting the main points. By improving this skill, an autistic person becomes more aware of what the other person is trying to communicate, helping reduce misunderstandings and create a more harmonious dialogue. Visual aids can also be valuable, especially in situations where nonverbal communication is key. Visualizing cues and expressions helps the autistic person recognize the nuances of the other person's body language, broadening their understanding of the social context. Ultimately, these strategies show that understanding and social connection are two-way streets. With a bit of practice and adaptation, both autistic and neurotypical individuals can build more empathetic and meaningful interactions. Tips for neurotypicals. For neurotypical people, understanding the communication and interaction differences of autistic individuals can make a significant difference in building more respectful and empathetic relationships. One of the first tips is to practice empathy, which goes beyond superficial sympathy. It involves trying to see the world through the other person's eyes, especially in situations where autistic behavior is misunderstood as rudeness or aloofness. When neurotypical people offer a space of understanding, they open a genuine opportunity for dialogue and acceptance. Another practical tip is to allow more time for responses. Not everyone processes information or forms words at the same speed, and this wait, simple as it seems, is a powerful way to show respect. Rather than filling the silence or pushing for a quick reply, giving extra time for an autistic person to respond creates a more welcoming environment. Small adjustments like these show that communication doesn't need to follow the same pace to be effective. Lastly, being clear and direct in communication avoids many misunderstandings. Simple phrases, without too many metaphors or sarcasm, make it easier to exchange ideas and prevent misinterpretation. It's a thoughtful gesture that doesn't require major changes, but transforms the quality of the conversation. In the end, these tips invite a larger reflection: couldn't we all, with a bit more empathy and patience, build richer and more respectful interactions? Now that you know these nuances of autistic behavior, how about rethinking your own interactions? What may have seemed like rudeness or indifference is often just a different way of sincere and unconventional expression. Why not adopt a posture of curiosity and openness? Imagine the positive impact a little patience and understanding can bring to your relationships. Ask yourself, am I truly listening and embracing others, or just judging based on what I consider normal? If you want to keep learning and discovering more about the autistic experience and improving your interactions, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below too. What did you find most interesting or surprising about this topic? Your thoughts are valuable and may help others see with fresh eyes.